Welcome to the Next Pitch podcast, hosted by Kate Love.
Hey guys, and welcome back for episode 5 of the Next Pitch podcast. We're so excited to have you. We have Alex Faust from the LA Kings today. We'll talk about him in just a little bit, but first, Lucas is here. How's it going?
It's going well, Kate. Yeah, we got a great episode ahead of us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, hitting things over here. I know you were busy last night watching the UFC fights. Why don't you tell me a little bit about those?
Okay, oh man, I don't know where to start. This was, as some people are saying, the best card in the history of the UFC. You had 3 title fights. Dominic Cruz, who is a big name in UFC and who has held the belt for a long time, was on the prelims, wasn't even on the main card. And then you talk about those 3 title fights. You had Peter Yan, who was, I think, 15-1 going into it, was absolutely dominating Sterling, and then in the second to last round had him down in an illegal knee disqualification. He lost his belt. Sterling looked concussed. He did not know where he was.
You and I were talking about this before, that you said that the ref told him no kneeing and he turned back to his corner and they said something to him in Russian, and if it was a language barrier. And I just want to go on the record and say that if you are a UFC champion, you know what the words no kneeing means.
Yeah, so they were talking about it because Khabib was there, who is the guy that beat McGregor, and he speaks Russian. He was able to tell Joe Rogan that he was asking him in Russian, "Am I allowed to strike right now?" And I'm not sure exactly what the rule book says, but usually it's if you have both hands on the ground, you're not allowed to get knee in the face because you have nothing to defend yourself. His hands weren't on the ground, but they were caught up in Peter's shoulders. So he had no defense, and his head just snapped back, and he was wide-eyed, was trying to stand up. You could hear him, because there was no fans, telling the doctor, "I want to continue fighting. I'm just struggling," because no one wants to win like that, no, especially a title fight. So that was crazy. And then you have probably the baddest woman in all of the history of the UFC, Amanda Nunes, who has defeated Ronda Rousey, Cyborg, Holly Holmes, these big names. Her fight with Ronda Rousey, it looked like she was bowling a second grader. She was hitting her in the face multiple times. Ronda Rousey had no defense. It lasted maybe 60 seconds. But she was fighting
that the last time Ronda Rousey fought in the UFC? Did she go to WWE right after? Okay.
Yeah. So she's just running through the best the UFC has to offer, and I think she's 5'8", and she was fighting a girl that was 6 foot, had a reach advantage, was this girl that everyone was like, oh, well, maybe she hasn't fought a girl like this before, and just made quick work of her, almost broke her arm, just tapped her out in 60 seconds. And then you had a crazy title fight with Adesanya. He was undefeated going into it. He went up a weight class for this, ended up losing in a decision, but was fighting a guy that weighs probably, walking around outside, probably 40 pounds more than him. They both had the same weight for the weight cuts, but obviously, he was bulking up for that, and the other guy was cutting. And by the time the fight happened, looking at him, he was at least 30 to 40 pounds heavier. But all in all, a great card and a hell of a night.
UFC is something I want to understand better. I'm not there yet. It's
We'll
on the
get you there.
to-do list. But I will say, you did not send me a text last night and say, "Hey, this is the best card of all time. Maybe you should turn on the TV."
It's also tough just because it's all pay-per-view, right? So if you're just sort of a casual fan, it's like, am I going to drop $50 to watch these fights that people I don't know? But there are,
maybe for the best card of all time. Maybe.
Yeah,
speaking of dominant women, though, we got to talk about my girl Katie Ledecky. I know you're not a swimming fan, but we do have the Olympics coming up this year. Very excited. I was super disappointed. I don't want to say that's been the hardest part of coronavirus for me, because obviously lives lost and just missing out on things has not been fun. But the Olympics are something that I super look forward to every year. So I'm counting down to the Summer Olympics this year. But Katie Wadecki in the meet this weekend won the 1500-meter free, the 400-meter free, the 200-meter free, and the 800-meter free by 12 seconds. And as a former competitive swimmer, let me tell you, my ass is not swimming the 1500-meter free and the 800-meter free in the same weekend ever. She is super dominant. She's 6 foot though. She's tall.
That's doing that many events and winning by 12 seconds. Like 12 seconds might not seem like a lot, but if you just
In
sit
the
there and actually count out,
1500, she wins by like 1 or 2 laps sometimes. It's just absolutely
man,
ridiculous. But I will say, yeah, I didn't realize. So she's, I kind of forget that like most swimmers, like most dominant swimmers, are like pretty tall because I'm fairly tall. And so, like, I don't know, that was just my world. I was a swimmer for those of you who don't know at home. And people will always look at me and they'll be like, "Oh, did you play basketball? No. Did you play volleyball? No, I was a swimmer." And then they look at you like you're a waste of height. But I think that reach is really, you talked about reach in the UFC fight, and that reach makes a big difference in the pool. So
I
yeah,
bet.
it was a very interesting meet. There was a race where the former world record holder, current world record holder, and the 2016 Olympian in this one event, in a backstroke event, all swam against each other. And I just looked it up. It was 0.08 seconds between first and third between the three of them, which is
That
nuts. That's a touch.
that is a close race. That is to have that equal competition for a race like that. It's something I wish that basketball still had. As you see now, there's freaking super teams. As we just found out today, Blake Griffin just joined the Nets, who already was probably the best big three we've ever seen: KD, James Harden, and Kyrie. And now they have probably the best dunker of the last decade.
You get so mad at me because I don't watch the NBA and I don't care about basketball. And this is exactly why. So, like, if you go back and you were to dig through the like old part of my Instagram, I used to have basketball season tickets. I loved basketball. And then when these
Who was your
super
team?
teams started happening, oh, Houston, I was in Houston. So, I really liked Chandler Parsons when he played for Houston. I liked him coming out of Florida, and all of my friends made fun of me. And then he was really good for Houston because he was a second round pick, right? No, no, he was drafted in the first round. But people were like, it doesn't matter. He's not going to be that big. Like, he's not going to be that good. And I'd be like, I don't know. He's pretty good at Florida. And they're like, no, no, it doesn't translate to the NBA. And then he was really, really good. And then he had microfracture surgery on his knee, which is really aggressive, and he just never really came back from that, which is super unfortunate. And then he got hit by a drunk driver last year, which is really sad.
Man,
But when these super teams started happening and it wasn't competitive anymore, I've told you this. Like, okay, the last game I went to was a Rockets Sacramento Kings game. And I was like, I already know the Rockets are going to win this by 30 points.
you weren't
I
cheering for the
went to,
Kings?
no, I was
Come
not cheering for the
on.
Kings. I wasn't cheering for anyone. I was there for the beer and the good
That's fair.
seats, and that was it. But like I knew it was going to be a 30-point difference at the end of the game, and it just wasn't fun for me anymore. I mean, I went to Oklahoma State right in the height of like Harden, Durant, and Westbrook, and Serge Ibaka. There were Ibaka billboards all over Oklahoma City, all up and down 35 driving through the state. So like I grew up like, or I was around like basketball culture, but then it just really shifted. And oh yeah, okay, I grew up during like the Rockets dream teams. So I'm dating myself here, but I barely remember the Rockets championships. Maybe the second one. I don't remember the first one, but yeah, the NBA has just gotten like not fun for me. And this Blake Griffin signing is just like another example of it, where it's like, okay, who's gonna realistically beat the Nets now?
Yeah, they've got so much firepower there. That's like, I know we're biased, but we both love baseball. And it's like Mike Trout, who's probably the greatest player of all time. His team's not
No, no,
guaranteed
no.
a
Let
World
us be
Series.
very
And
clear. He is the greatest player of all time, and I will actually walk away from a conversation where someone tries to reason with me that he is not.
But so he's the greatest player of all time, and it's by no stretch of the imagination a guarantee that the Angels are gonna not even win a World Series, but get there, or maybe even not make the playoffs. Like
They've never made the
you,
playoffs with him. Mike Trout has never played in a playoff game.
that's exactly the point. There, you can't just take over a game with the best player. The way that LeBron could take over a game, which maybe isn't as exciting as the average person, but it definitely comes into a team atmosphere and why at least it's a little bit more of a level playing field.
Yeah, and I think too, like even with like the team that the Dodgers have put together, which is terrifying, I
Mm-hmm.
still like the Padres have made some moves not on the same budget. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Padres have spent some money this offseason, but they're not on the same like budget freeness that the Dodgers have. And they put together a super competitive team. The Giants are looking sneaky good.
Uh oh.
Like I said, I think that we've talked about this. I think the NL West is going to be competitive between three teams. I think it's going to look fun. I think there's two teams that are like for sure, and then I think the Giants could surprise some people.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the NL West, yeah, AL East. I don't know
NL
if I
West
said
and NL
NL
East.
East. The AL East is going to be really interesting. I think the Rays are going to be sneaky good again. Like
Mm-hmm.
every year, people are like, they're not going to do anything. And then they do things. And then obviously the Yankees have put together a really special team. And who else is over there that has a good team? Why can I not think who's in the AL East? Oh, Toronto. Toronto's got a spectacular team coming up. They've got a lot of really young guys. They've got good pitching. They just, yeah. So I think even though these teams put together these super teams, like they can be brought down. I mean, look what Tampa did to New York last year. Just completely owned
Definitely.
them with
Definitely.
1/18th the budget. So
That's the beautiful sport of baseball. But shifting from baseball over to hockey, I think we've got a pretty good episode ahead of us. Alex Faust, who is the broadcaster for the LA Kings.
yeah, it
Kate.
does LA Kings play by play. He speaking of large markets, like his story is really interesting. So he I don't want to say fell into this job because he definitely worked for it, but for your first full-time team job to be the LA Kings, that's spectacular. And he definitely deserves it.
It's
You and I
wild.
talked about this when we finished recording with him that he's just very eloquent and his vocabulary is impressive and just the way he thinks. And then hearing him like throw three of the most complicated Russian names I've ever heard back to back to back was terrifying. So yeah, it's a great episode. It's a lot of fun. For those of you who don't know, I'm a big hockey fan, so this one was a lot of fun for me. I did grow up a Vancouver Canucks fan, and then I'm also kind of a San Jose Sharks fan. So all teams that hate the Kings. But yeah, Alex was super great about it. And I like the Kings. It's a great hockey atmosphere. Obviously, the Staples Center is like borderline unbeatable, but
Definitely. When he mentioned something about, you know, being not in the top five teams in LA, but still having this huge fan base. That's just, I mean, obviously LA is a huge city, but he definitely has some recognition for some big names, and we can get, well, these guys will hear that in the episode. But Kate, do you just want to jump into it now?
yeah, let's get going. Hi, Alex. How's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Sun is shining. It's 65 degrees on March 4th. There's not much to complain about in Southern California.
That is hard to find a problem with. So, kind of jumping in here, you were born in Brooklyn.
Indeed, Brooklyn, New York. I'm still, even though I'm an LA guy now. You can take the kid out of New York, but you can never take the New Yorker out of him. So I'll always consider myself a New Yorker.
And this is going to come into play later, but are you a Yankees fan?
I did grow up a Yankees fan, but if I'm being perfectly honest, after I left the city when I went to college, I kind of slowly became a little bit more detached from the team. It's hard to say that considering where I lived in college, but it's kind of hard when you're on the opposite coast, and you're working a season that kind of overlaps a bit to be a diehard fan of any team. So yeah, I grew up a Yankee fan, but I'd say that I'm more. I'll watch baseball, and I won't really care too much about which teams are in it now.
Very fair. Very fair. Okay, so I did a lot of research on you. You are the son of television producers. I do lots of research.
Wow. Okay.
You are
I
the
don't know
son of
if to be
television
scared or not.
producers. You shouldn't be scared. It's all good. Did you always know that you wanted to end up in TV?
No. I think I was trying to figure out, like anybody else, what you want to do in college and what you want to do after you graduate. And I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't think I was cut out really to be working in sports broadcasting or television or any of that. So I was intent on going somewhere else, and I guess I did that for a little while. But it's funny how my dad at times would tell me, you don't want to go into broadcasting. It's really not that fun. And like, things come full circle. All right, look where I am now.
Very fair. And so you went to Northeastern, and while you were there, it says that you called basketball and ice hockey games. So you were doing a little bit of broadcasting. What was your major when you were at Northeastern?
I majored in economics with a kind of a concentration or minor in political science, and that was my thought process that, oh, this is a real job, this is a real career. I could work in a consulting firm, I could work at a bank, I could work in PR somewhere. Like, I could do any number of things with this degree. And I just, again, I legitimately had the thought that, well, there's not much money in this sports broadcasting thing, and you have to be really lucky to get where you are, and I'm certainly very lucky to be where I'm at. But it was as simple as just, I didn't think it was a realistic career option.
So you did end up pursuing that. You worked for one of the big four as a data
Mm-hmm.
analyst and a consultant.
Mm-hmm.
So were you like just waiting for a broadcasting opportunity to come along, or did it just kind of fall in your lap? Because I know that so I grew up a Vancouver Canucks fan. So I actually heard you a very long time ago because you used to fill in for Utica.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, I like anybody who has a passion project, you try to find an outlet, and my passion was for broadcasting. There's no doubt about that. I loved hockey broadcasting when I was in college, and I even thought at the time it's fairly unique as a student broadcaster because there aren't a lot of Division I hockey programs. So I wanted to continue doing it, and after graduating, picked up some freelance work, just 30-40 bucks a game, calling games for the local Division III team, UMass Boston. And I do a little bit of fill-in work here or there around New England. And through a friend of a friend, I got connected with Brendan Burke, who had just been hired as the voice of the Utica Comets. He just got his big break by getting hired to do college football on Fox Sports Net in the fall of 2013. Of course, that meant Saturdays and most Fridays were off limits. He had to go work television. So he was looking for a fill-in, and there were very few folks available who could kind of on a Friday and Saturday, who weren't already working in the AHL, to come in, do a couple games, and go home basically, and not really have a pathway to be a full-time broadcaster. And I wasn't looking for that. I was gainfully employed, as you talked about, with my job as an analyst at Price Waterhouse. So I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity. And we created a situation where I would come in Fridays and Saturdays, do the game, drive back to Boston after, and that was that. It was great. So I viewed it as kind of a nice side hustle, or just, again, a fun passion project on nights and weekends. And one thing leads to another, and you'd like to think that you pass certain tests along the way in your career, and it started to grow into more than just filling in minor league hockey.
Yeah. So is that when you decided to start quit your job in freelancing, or what kind of led to that decision?
No, not right away, at least. I mean, I was again under no illusion that I'd be be able to make a living out of it full time as a freelancer. I legitimately, for the games in Utica, I was just basically covering my expenses, and that was that.
Yeah.
And again, it was for fun, right? I was doing games at my alma mater at Northeastern. They would pay me a stipend. I would do the home games, and then I would use all that money from the stipend to pay my own travel expenses. It was like, net breaking even on the
Right.
season. And again, it was for fun more than anything else. But I've started to pick up a little bit of work in New England at Nesson doing college hockey, and that was my first big break in television. Especially given that's how I started broadcasting, was doing college hockey, and to be comfortable with that, and to transition into my first television gig as a professional, made it really easy to, I think, get used to working in that environment. And you know you send your reel around to different places, and you hope that somebody bites and somebody takes a chance on you. And I got a couple of chances with the ESPN regional television, ESPN 3, to do some football and a little bit of basketball, and at the same time got a opportunity to try out essentially for Fox Sports Net at the time, doing college hoops here or there. And again, it was just, it was an audition essentially at the time. It was a live audition. We're going to try
Right.
you out, and if it works, well, we'll give you more. If not, okay, no hard feelings. And I was lucky enough that whatever my work was in front of them was there at the right time, and I got more opportunities. So it took several years of doing freelance work, but I quit my full-time job in 2016. So I graduated in 2012. I was doing all this work on the side, and even then, when I quit my job, I wasn't fully sure that I'd be able to pay my rent, but
Yeah.
it was enough to where I felt like, okay, if I continue progressing at this pace and I can sink all my time into this, then inevitably I will get better, and I will pick up enough work to where it's full time. And it wasn't like a huge risk on my end, because I could still go back and kind of apply for another job at another big four or some small
Right.
consultancy. Like, I could have gone back at any time. But I was fortunate that I was able to stick in sports TV.
He had a great degree to fall back on, and not everyone can say
Exactly.
that.
Exactly. Well, that was the point. That was why I did it, because I was so afraid of failure that I figured I need to have a fallback plan, or I need to have
Right.
a first plan, and then maybe sports will work out, but maybe I don't have to go into it full time. Maybe I could just kind of dabble a little bit here and there. And that's the dirty little secret in our industry, is a lot of people, especially ESPNU, or you're in a handful of college basketball games or college football games here or there, or you're doing web streaming. For most people, it's not full time. It's their side gig.
Right.
It's a very select, lucky few who get to do this full time.
I mean,
Now, did you?
obviously you had some freelance work and you kind of like, stuck your toe in the water, but did you have a tipping point where obviously, you quit your job? What was it that kind of pushed you over the edge to say, hey, this is my passion, I'm going to pursue this with all my energy? Obviously you had a fallback plan, but what was that
Yeah,
tipping point?
I think it was the spring of 2016, and I was kind of presented at my full time job with a fork in the road. I was on a team that was slowly not being wound down, but their importance, their sales heft within the company was diminishing. And I realized, I could have, I knew enough people within the firm to make a move internally, and to change teams, or to change the vertical that I was in. But I said at the time, this sports thing is coming along and picking up a lot more work, and I can kind of just not coast, but I can hang around, and I wouldn't have to travel. If I changed teams, I probably would have had to travel more. I probably would have had more actual time commitment required. Or I could kind of hang around here, see what happens. If I can land another set of games next season, then maybe I'll step away. And so it wasn't like one moment that created a tipping point. It was the realization that, okay, I'm picking up enough work. I can maybe change my career path in my day job to where it's a little bit easier. I'm stunting my growth and development as an analyst, but I'm allowing myself more time and flexibility as a broadcaster. So that was the trade-off I made there. And I'm glad I made it at the time, because eventually I did quit my job. And it was easier to do because I had already kind of created an off-ramp. But there was risk at the time that I was basically boxing myself out in two ways, because if sports didn't pan out, well, then I'm now in a position where I can't maneuver as freely within the firm, and my career growth is stunted. And then where do I go from there? So it does require a fair amount of risk, but relative to what a lot of folks deal with and stories I hear about, folks, selling all their possessions basically and taking a minor league job in Iowa or something. I didn't have to do any of that, and I'm incredibly fortunate that my career broke that way.
Did you always know that you wanted to do, like, is hockey your favorite sport? Was that your passion, or is that just the way that it kind of crumbled?
Yeah, it's funny because, like I said, I grew up a baseball fan, and if you were to ask 10-year-old me, if you were given the opportunity to work as a sports broadcaster, I'd say, "Oh, I want to be the voice of the New York Yankees. That's my dream job." And then if you ask me today, I love working in hockey, and there's no other place I'd rather be than in the NHL. And not to say that I don't love doing college football and college basketball, because I really enjoy going back to campuses and doing that. But as of right now, the ability to do hockey full time, that certainly is where I'm trying to keep my career focused on. And I'm lucky enough to be with a team and have the stability of a team job. But yeah, hockey is my passion, and what I love calling more than any other sport.
So you've obviously ended up with the LA Kings. And I read that you called a Blackhawks Lightning game that ended up being your audition tape. How does that work? Like, does it work where you go into that and you're kind of like, oh, the Kings are watching, this is an opening? Or did
Yeah.
the opening pop up and you were like, hey, I called this beautiful game. Here you go.
So it's funny. My job interview process kind of happened in reverse in a lot of respects, because a lot of folks would walk into an interview and present, "Here's my work as it is today, and you either like it or you don't." I was very fortunate the way the timing worked out with this job opening up. Bob Miller announced his retirement in January of 2017, and I was like, okay, that's interesting. Maybe that's an opening. I can kick the tires on that. Well, what's the worst that could happen? My goal was just to get an interview. That's all it was. My
Right.
goal was just to get an in-person interview. And at the time, I was freelancing for NBCSN doing college hockey. I had done a couple of those games, and was given the opportunity to fill in on an NHL game between the Blackhawks and the Lightning. It was one of those games where the feed was being produced by NBC Sports Chicago, and I was just basically overlaying a commentary track on their feed, because they wanted a different broadcast for the national audience. So it wasn't one of
Right.
those. It wasn't one of those the showcase Wednesday night hockey or Sunday NBC games to a national audience. It was to a limited audience, but nonetheless, it was NHL, right? This was a
Yeah.
huge
And it's
opportunity,
Chicago. That's not a small
right?
market.
No, 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 not at all. And I mean, Tampa. Let's be honest, like, that's a terrific market. So
Mhm.
I was in the process of talking to people at Fox Sports Net and putting my hat in the ring, essentially, to say I'm interested. I had been in LA a couple of days prior to this game. Actually, I was doing a freelance gig, kind of an open audition at Tennis Channel, and I had arranged an in-person interview with one of the coordinating producers at Fox Sports Net, and I told him, "Hey, I've got this game coming up." And right there, as I'm sitting in his office, he gets his television remote, picks it up, and sets the record button on his DVR
Oh
for
my
this game.
gosh.
So I knew then and there this was going to be my audition. And again, it happens in reverse, right? I get a national game before I'm trying out for a team job. So it was kind of wild. And the game itself, so much can happen, right? You can get an absolute dud of a game, and that might dictate whether, you put together material that is exciting enough for somebody to want to take a chance on. But I was so fortunate to get a great game, a comeback for Tampa that goes to overtime, that delivers a fast-paced, breathless 3-on-3 that is just any broadcaster's dream to call, punctuated by an overtime winner from the home team. Like, that's dream stuff. It really is. And I look back on that and I still say to myself, how the hell did I get so fortunate to get that opportunity to nail this job? Because it really was, timing and opportunity, right, coming together.
Definition of luck by Oprah is when
Yeah,
preparation
yeah.
meets opportunity.
Yeah.
It's funny to hear you say that you love calling a 3-on-3 overtime, because 3-on-3 overtimes are pure chaos. They
Hmm.
are, it's hard to find the puck when
Hmm.
I mean, everything's just moving so fast, bodies are flying everywhere. You wouldn't think that it makes that big of a difference to go from 5-on-5 to 3-on-3, but it
Oh,
really does.
it's a different game. Like
Hmm.
the approach to the game is completely different than it is 5-on-5. And there's more structure in 3-on-3 now than when it first came around. When it first came around, you're totally correct. It was just chaos everywhere. Now teams are starting, and coaches are starting to wise up to the fact that they can run set plays and they can be more deliberate, but it's still exciting, especially when there's breakdowns and there's a 2-on-1 this way and then a 2-on-1 the other way. It's hockey excitement distilled into a 5-minute version of perfection.
And a lot of sprint. It's sprint for you. Like,
Hmm.
you're just
Hmm.
having to call constantly. So
Yep.
we mentioned that calling a game in Chicago is a huge market. Then you land this job with the Kings, which is one of the largest broadcast markets in the world.
Hmm.
What is that like to step into as like this is your first big full-time job and you're
Yeah.
in this huge market?
It's interesting because on the one hand, it's the number 2 media market in the US. It's basically the hub of the entertainment industry, right? I
Right.
read the LA Times every morning, and there's an entire section devoted to the arts. I mean, I don't know of any other daily newspaper in the country, let alone the world, that has a daily section devoted to the arts. So it's intimidating. It's intimidating to walk into this environment. It's so funny because being in Boston and growing up in New York, these are really diehard sports markets, and the passion from sports fans is evident there. You feel the passion in a different way here. There's a distinct difference, and it's if you're a fan of an LA sports team, you are fiercely loyal, uh, and you kind of rep your team in a different way. In New York and Boston and Philly and Chicago, like a lot of these eastern markets, it's almost cynical. Here, it's very much a joyful passion for your team, and it manifests itself in a different way. I could take a step back and realistically say, well, the Kings are the 7th most popular team in Los Angeles. That would still probably make them the most popular team by sheer volume, by sheer number of fans in a lot of other markets. So
Right.
it's weird how kind of in one sense we're behind the Lakers and the Dodgers and the Angels and all that, but on the other, like, this is a big freaking deal.
Yeah.
So seeing that on a daily basis is such an interesting thing about the job. And one thing I love about it is the fact that when I drive down the freeway, I see the Hollywood sign every day. And
Oh,
it's I take this turn on the ramp onto the 105 freeway going north, onto the 110 freeway, and I see the Hollywood sign. Have you seen the opening scene of La La Land, the movie?
mhm.
So where they're dancing on all the cars and singing. I take
Right.
that ramp every day. I take that exact
Okay.
road every day. So it's a privilege, no doubt, to be in this market and to be able to call this my full-time job.
Is it kind of a pinch yourself every time you pass the Hollywood sign moment?
A little bit. It it's on the one hand, it's almost like a metaphor, right? It's so distant, and Hollywood and the entertainment industry, if you don't want it to be kind of dominant in your world in LA, you can carve out your own niche here. Like hockey, the hockey world in LA is somewhat of a niche. You have to be really passionate for a sport that's not native to this area. And
Yeah.
for many kids, I mean, we're talking only about maybe the second generation of kids who had access on a, available ice right in the area.
Right.
There are not a lot of hockey rinks here, so we're talking a sport that has grown a tremendous amount in this area. It's not like you can in Boston or New York or in Canada, you go to your backyard instead of a backyard rink. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist here. It's not like taking a basketball down to the local playground and shooting hoops, or taking a bat and a ball and a glove and getting together with a couple friends and tossing a ball around the yard. Like it's or playing soccer, right? It requires a lot of equipment. It requires ice time. But to see how much it's grown here is incredible. It really is.
Especially in the last 10 years, because obviously the Kings were tremendous there for a while, have a
Hmm.
Stanley Cup under their belt.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And ice time is a huge factor. I always try and explain that to people. I grew up in Texas. We were
Hmm.
fortunate. I'm from the Houston area. We actually had a ice rink like 10 minutes from my house. So I
Mm.
had a cousin that played hockey and we regularly went to the ice rink, but I played street hockey every day of my
Mm.
life,
Yeah. Yep.
very aggressively, and I have many, many scars on my knees to prove it.
See,
But
that's where I think LA, like, there, it stands to reason that there's a lot of growth yet that could happen in street hockey, and especially in these lots, these playgrounds near the beach, you could absolutely set up street
mhm.
hockey games.
You see a couple of them pop up every once in a while, but you're right. There's a
Hmm.
lot of great places that you could put a little street hockey rink out there.
Hmm.
Okay, is it insane to you that, like, as a play-by-play announcer, if you came into this 50 years ago, there wouldn't be like this television ready component that you had to be there for? It's kind of, I don't want to say it's like it has narrowed the field. It's narrowed people that they're like ready to bring up. Is it weird to you that now that's become like a large component that you can no longer just sit there and announce a game, that you have to have this whole television component going on as well?
Yeah, in one ways, yes. In another way, like any business, you have to evolve or die. And this is a job where there's now a component even with interacting on social media. It's
Hmm.
not a mandatory part of your job, but it's unspoken and understood that if you're going to be in a role like this, you're expected to have some sort of interactive component. So there's that. Even I do think stylistically it's impacted hockey announcers more than most. I think hockey and basketball, with the advent of HDTV especially, it used to be that you could call it like you would on radio, and it
Right.
wouldn't really seem weird to somebody. But now, if I'm constantly saying left wing, right wing, near side, far side, in the circle, at the hash marks, at center ice, if I'm constantly saying those words, you're going to be like, I can see it, dude. Like, I can see the puck. It's HDTV. So there's that. I think that's the biggest impact on having television be the primary medium for this sport now, is that you change how you describe the game. And I'll be perfectly honest. I've seen feedback from some fans here because Bob Miller, who's Hall of Famer and my predecessor here in LA, he called a radio style because that's
Right.
when he started, and for a good 25 years, that was what it was. It was a radio TV simulcast. So his style inevitably drifted towards being less about context and storytelling, and more along the lines of nuts and bolts. Where's the puck? Left side, right side, near, far. Um, you know, so I do have to strike a balance, knowing that the audience here is used to a certain style of storytelling. At the same time, we're trying to, well, we have to recognize that the medium has changed over time, and we give more context with our athletes probably than we used to. We try to humanize a little bit more than we used to.
Right.
um, so part of our charge as television announcers is to be able to tell somebody's story beyond how many points, goals, assists they have. Where are they from? What do they enjoy doing in their off time? What's his or her approach to a game? What are they thinking? What are they feeling right now? I mean, these are things that are kind of part of um, our charge as announcers now to bring to the table. And it may not work for everybody, but it's part of what's happened with television and giving the viewer at home such a great view now. You can watch on a 55-inch TV and hockey looks great. It did not look good when it was in standard definition on a 20-inch television. Like, we're not fooling anybody anymore. So it's changed a lot in that respect. But I don't think in terms of the selection of announcers, it's changed very much. If anything, the proliferation of streaming video and the ability to do games at lower levels has given more opportunities for broadcasters to get their feet wet. I think it has taken away the amount of full-time jobs, especially in the American League and especially in the East Coast League, for potential announcers, because we're not as dependent on radio anymore, and you can bring somebody in on a spec basis, on a per game basis. But once you get to this level, luckily the NHL still, for the most part, has a TV announcer and a radio announcer for every team.
So all of that info that you have to, provide during a game, background stories, what the guys are feeling, obviously you get some of that in interviews, but do you have to do a lot of research in your downtime? I know my dad's actually in radio too, and he does about 3 to 4 hours a night of show prep the night before. Is that kind of what your schedule looks like too?
Yeah, no doubt. And it's 3 or 4 hours before every game. So we played last night. I will probably take a good 3-4 hours today to update all my notes, to go through any clips from newspapers, and it may take longer, especially with the team that we haven't seen in a while. Luckily we're playing all division opponents, so I only have to worry pretty much about 7 teams. But when we're playing, let's say in the second half of the season, and we played Ottawa in October, and we have to play them again in March, I'm way behind the curve on what's happened with the Ottawa Senators, so I need to go and kind of dig deeper into that. So it might take a little bit longer, but it does. I think that's one thing that folks don't realize, is that the amount of preparation involved in this job is incredible, and if you're ill prepared, then you're going to come away from a broadcast feeling like, ooh, I missed something. Or, somebody worse yet, somebody at home will realize, hey, this guy missed this big storyline. Like, what's up with that? Like, why do they ignore it? So it does require a lot of preparation and organizing your work in such a way that you can have either quick recall or quickly bring to the forefront a note that you had waiting for a specific moment.
Yeah, because you guys are realistically filling 3 to 4 hours of airtime with stories and facts. And that's one of the things. We had a guy who trained at our facility named Joe Beimel, who played in the big leagues for 13, 14 years. He's going to kill me if I get that wrong. And he was talking about Vin Scully. And he said that one time he was pitching for the Dodgers, and his parents had sent him like a text message after the game. And they're like, Vin Scully told the story of when you were wrestling in middle school and his hair was too long. And his dad gave him a haircut in the parking lot. And to this day, Joe does not know how Vin figured that story out.
There's
just the amount of research.
Oh, and in baseball, you have to fill a lot more time with those stories. In hockey, it's so fast paced. We barely have time to get any of that stuff in. And there are times where you through the run of play you get caught in the middle of something, and play picks up rapidly, and you gotta have to let's get back to the action here. And I feel like the storytelling bar from Vin Scully, I mean, it's set the bar for everybody else really, really high, right? He's the best ever to do it. His secret was he would actually he would have the media staff for the Dodgers help collect newspaper clippings or help him with research on different players, physically bringing him like the clippings. And what he would do is he would take out a story. He would read it, obviously, and take notes on it. And he would actually tape it to the page in the media guide. Like, let's say the Dodger media guide. Okay, this player's up to bat. I'm opening up that page. Most of this, again, is before computers were all that ubiquitous. So he would open up the media guide and right on this page, oh, there's that story. So, as you're describing it, and he knows the story because he already did the research, but he can look in between pitches and just, if there's anything else that was of note that, maybe he can go into further detail, it's right there for him. And everybody keeps a notebook of different anecdotes, different things about a particular player. I have mine digitally on OneNote, and most of that for me is when I do tennis. There are hundreds and hundreds of tennis players, and I may not see one for months. So I may, through a tournament, I may see a player, and I may do a deep dive into their background then, and I'll leave it. But when it comes to, oh, they're playing again. Oh, I have all this stuff. I have all this background on this player. I don't have to use it, but it's there in case I need it. And I can kind of with familiarity dive back into anything specific about their background.
Tennis is like this too, but how steep was the learning curve on pronouncing some of those Russian last names?
Well, I'll be perfectly frank. I lean heavily on our colleague Martina Navratilova. So anything Czech, Russian, Polish, anything Eastern European is basically whatever Martina says goes. But it's now a little bit easier. The tours have put out audio guides. I mean, it didn't used to be this way. It used to be like, okay, well, what have we been calling him or her? Okay, well, that's what we'll go with then. And then, you'll hear from their publicists, they'll reach out. It's actually pronounced this way. But it mostly, when you're dealing with players in the top 100, it's pretty consistent. Folks have been called a certain name for most of their careers. It is kind of funny, though, coming up, like in the AHL, some of these guys who had difficult names, Andrei Vasilevsky with the Tampa Bay Lightning. I saw him in the AHL. Nikita Kucherov, saw him in the AHL. He was also teammates with Vladislav Nemesnikov. They were all on the Syracuse Crunch. So try to say all those names at the same time. I guess that's table stakes in our business too. You have to be able to pronounce names correctly.
Well, and you have to know them well because hockey is so fast paced. It's a little different in tennis. Like obviously you're only focused on 2 or 4 people at the same time, but I think you'll get a kick out of this. My sister, for the life of her, cannot pronounce Tsitsipas. Like she just can't remember it. And so she just straight up calls him pasta. Like looks at the TV and she's like, is that pasta? I'm like, that is pasta. We were watching the Australian Open and she was like, is he in the finals? Yes. Yes, he is. This is probably the question I'm most excited to ask you. In 2018, our beloved Alex Trebek mentioned you as a possible replacement for him on Jeopardy. What was that like? Because from what I read, it seemed like this was not on your radar at all. Like you had no idea he even knew who you were.
Correct. I was completely caught off guard by surprise. It's unfortunate I never got a chance to meet Alex actually. But yeah, it was it was almost like a casual drop in an interview when somebody was asking. It couldn't have been the first time he was asked. Hey, have you ever thought about who would take over you? And the way he dropped my name was, yeah, that kid who does the LA Kings. He does a really good job, and this other woman on CNN, she does a good job. And then it blew up to like Alex Trebek picks his replacement. Because inevitably that's how it happens. And I actually it's funny, after the story dropped on TMZ of all places, so here's your welcome to LA moment, you wind up on TMZ. But I actually went over, their offices are actually almost across the street from where we live in LA. And so I went over there after this story dropped because Harvey Levin actually left a voicemail on my phone in traditional Harvey fashion of just like, hey, it's Harvey Levin, hey, who is Alex Faust? Like, I've got a question for you. And, the whole idea was at some point, I think TMZ, because they try to inject themselves in the story a little bit, they almost tried to play matchmaker and like try to put me in touch with Sony Pictures. And I'm like, guys, like, if they want to call me, like, they know where I live. They know where to find me. I never got a call, but that's not to say, at some point, sure, they might, but It was kind of funny. That was very much a welcome to LA moment. You have Alex Trebek watching your games because he's from Canada and he's a hockey fan. I believe he's a Toronto Maple Leafs fan. I could be wrong. Maybe Montreal. I'm not sure, but
I was gonna
either
say I
way,
don't remember if he's a Leafs or Canadians fan.
yeah. But either way, he's watching your games because we're other than the Ducks, we're the only hockey broadcast consistently in Southern California, and he admires your work. It's awesome. It's awesome to have a titan in an industry like that to admire your work. That's how I felt about it.
So if you could fit it into your schedule, would you consider Jeopardy?
Sure. If phone call ever came, you audition, you kick the tires. I would be lying to you if I said it was a job or an opportunity that I was actively pursuing, because I love my job. I actually I wouldn't want to have to curtail the amount of work that I would do in sports. If you could do something like that side by side, sure. But I have a feeling that when you're in a role like that, they want it to be a full-time pursuit,
Right.
because that's what you're identified with.
Maybe
So
we can just get you on for like a guest stint, like a 1 week
sure,
celebrity host stint.
sure. I hear it pays well. Why not?
There was a weekend where I did a Vancouver Canucks Sharks game in San Jose, caught the first flight to LA, went to a Texans Rams game at the Coliseum, went home and changed, and went to the Staples Center for the Sharks Kings game that night. The Uber driver told me on the way to the Staples Center, "You look tired." And I was like, "Thank you. I think I've slept maybe 5 hours in the last 48. Appreciate that." But so I'm dead tired. I'm like a zombie walking to the stadium. All I can think about is food. I'm sitting in the stands and the light show to start the game starts. And holy shit, what a stadium.
Yep.
What is it? Do you ever just like sit back and like pinch yourself and you're like, my workplace is the Staples Center?
Actually, it's really cool, where our broadcast booth is, and it allows us to kind of soak it up when there are fans in the building. Right now, we look around and it's empty. It's kind of depressing. But
Right.
we on a normal basis, I'll look around, and we a lot of broadcast booths in the NHL either are up in the rafters or in a broadcast gondola, and you kind of look down at the seats and the stands and the ice. Our position is right in the 300 level,
Okay.
and we look to our left, we see fans. We look to our right, we see fans. We look behind us, and we see fans. So you are really surrounded by the atmosphere at Staples Center, and there's no other building in the NHL quite like it. It's cavernous, so it's big, but it also is
Right.
it gets really, really loud. And I would put it up there in terms of game day atmosphere when the Kings are playing well with any team in the National Hockey League. These fans love the sport and they love the team. They are, as I said earlier, fiercely loyal. I didn't quite understand when I was walking into this job in LA. I figured, oh, it's LA, like whatever, kind of blasé about their team. No. They are devoted. When you're a fan of hockey in Los Angeles, I think you have a sense that like we're part of this small-ish community, and we're going to make the most of it. And the fans here are tremendous.
Yeah, it's you talk about being in Hollywood and like the production value. I've been to a lot of stadiums and a lot of stadiums do it well. I've been to Madison Square Garden. I thought their pre-game stuff was really pretty, but then I could not get over the Staples Center. I think I just sat there in like pure amazement at what was happening in front of me.
I will say that MSG has a better looking ceiling, but that's only because it was designed in a different time, a different era, when we didn't have as many, concerns about rigging for concerts and the Grammy Awards and all of that. MSG's had to retrofit quite a lot. Staples Center, it's actually kind of interesting. They celebrated their 20th anniversary last year, and the building still looks new. I mean, they really haven't had to do much with it. It's still one of the most polished buildings in the league.
It really is. It's a beautiful stadium. And there are a lot of them that show their age really quickly at 20 years where you're thinking like, oh, this needs to be redone.
Mm-hmm.
But speaking of iconic stadiums, you also called a few Red Sox game.
Mm-hmm.
What's it like calling at Fenway Park?
Well, I'll flash back to 2008. That was my first experience calling a game at Fenway Park. It was the baseball beanpot with Harvard, Northeastern, BC, and UMass, because BU doesn't have a baseball team. And I got a chance to call a game from the press box at Fenway Park, and even that with no fans in the stands. I mean, it's special. It went one of those venerable buildings in sport, and you have such a great view of the action. We talk about the gondolas in hockey and the old school way that you see it. And in Fenway Park, you're right on top of the action. The press box in Fenway Park, you look down and you're looking at home plate basically. So I got an opportunity to go back to Nesson. Actually, my old boss there was looking again to fill in that role late in the season. Dave O'Brien couldn't do a couple of games, and was calling some folks who worked in New England or that he was familiar with, and said, "Hey, I know it's unusual, but would you consider doing this?" And I jumped at the chance. Obviously, I had never called a Major League Baseball game before, and that was one of my lifelong goals. Again, growing up a baseball fan, and the game I got to do at Fenway was Yankees Red Sox with Dennis Eckersley and Jerry Remy in the booth on Nesson. And again, growing up in New York, growing up a Yankee fan, like it was weird in one sense, but my grandmother was a gigantic Red Sox fan, and after living there for 5 years, it's hard not to get wrapped up in the passion, how much people love the team in Boston. And frankly, after a while, like, not to say that you become a fiercely diehard Red Sox fan yourself, but you can't help but like enjoy being around the city when the team is winning. It's
Right.
infectious, the enthusiasm, and I loved every part of the experience. It was a dream come true and a bucket list item. I don't, if I never call another Major League Baseball game in my life, I can say, what, I've done it. It was amazing, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity.
Yeah, you called the greatest rivalry in baseball and the most iconic stadium in baseball. That's a
Yeah.
pretty hard pinnacle to top.
I can't top that.
You would have also been in Boston during my greatest heartbreak in 2011 when my Canucks forgot how to hockey in Game 7. I mean, that was in Vancouver, but
yeah. I will say, again, the Bruins and how the passion for the teams in Boston, you basically can substitute one for another. And if they win a championship, the duck boat parade down Boylston Street is going to be just as jammed for one team over another. It's remarkable, whether it's the Pats, the Celtics, the Bruins, the Sox. They love them all. It's awesome.
All right, we'll finish with some rapid fire questions.
Sure.
Who is your favorite player to interview?
Oh, gosh. Favorite player? I think it's Drew Doughty, because you know that he's going to be unfiltered when you talk to him. For better or worse, he has no filter. It's great.
Yeah, you can tell on the ice too. He
He
wears a lot
Chirp
of
City.
his emotions on his face.
Yep. Chirp City.
What is your career highlight?
Calling a Stanley Cup playoff game. And I got to do it for the Kings in 2018, and I got to do it for NBC Sports in 2019. There's nothing like the Stanley Cup playoffs. Nothing like it. And to be able to work playoff games in front of a packed house, it's special. It gives me goosebumps thinking about it, actually.
And how do you feel about NHL players being back in the Olympics?
Love it. It's good for the game. I know there's no tangible benefit to the NHL, to its owners, and actually, for general managers who are sweating it out, hoping that their players don't get hurt. There's no tangible benefit. There really isn't. But in terms of keeping attention on the sport of hockey and the best that it has to offer, I think having players in the Olympics is it's table stakes for the hockey world, really, because at no other point in the year could you garner, as go back to 2010, USA Canada gold medal game drew 27 million people on television. 27 million, 30, a peak with 30. What other hockey game can you think of that would ever draw 30 million people to watch in the United States? 10% of the country watched a hockey game. That's incredible. So I think it's important to keep NHL players in the Olympics for the moments that matter. And the IOC, to their credit, and the IIHF have gotten a lot more flexible. IIHF on helping with travel and insurance and all that, and the IOC with video rights. That was a big sticking point for the NHL, is that if, let's say, Sidney Crosby scores the golden goal in 2010 and the Penguins
Right.
want to salute him on his first game back, they cannot show, or they could not show, video of that moment on the scoreboard inside PPG Pets
Oh,
Arena. They were not allowed.
I don't know
They
if
were
I
only allowed to
realized
show
that.
still images. Yeah. And the NHL couldn't share images on its social media channels or video. They could share images, still images, but they couldn't share video. Now the IOC is coming around to the fact that, wait a minute, if we allow this small concession, we can get these guys back. So they've done that, and there's a lot more flexibility. Like, even the other day, I was watching a documentary on ESPN that was around hockey in the Olympics, and specifically they were showing footage of Crosby's goal, and I had never seen footage from an Olympics on ESPN before, because they were not allowed to use the video. But the IOC has loosened things up quite a bit, and I think it'll be a huge help to the NHL if they can sell, either marketing or even just to promote ticket sales or promote viewership, sell using that footage, that iconic footage. I think it's a huge win for the NHL, and in that way, there is a tangible benefit to having players in the Olympics.
I can see that. Yeah, for me, it's hard because we're Swedish, and so not having Henrik Lundqvist in goal in the last Olympics was literally soul crushing. But
didn't he win a gold medal in 2006?
Yeah, in Torino.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's done everything but win the Stanley Cup.
That's
My
correct.
poor little broken heart. Yeah, it's like, for me, the fun of like an outdoor game. I hate that outdoor games count for anything like in the standings, just because they can be so unpredictable. But the fun for me of an outdoor game is that you really get to see these guys who, this is a job. I think sometimes we forget it's a job, revert to like this childlike joy because they're playing outside, they're doing something, it reminds them of their childhood. And I feel the same way about the Olympics. It's just a different atmosphere, and you see difference out of the players. I really think it endears them to a lot of people.
Yeah, you figure the All-Star game happens in most years, and guys go half speed. Oh yeah, whatever. Yeah. But it's an all-star tournament at the Olympics, and these guys are going full speed, and these are the best in the game. I mean, it is hockey at its highest level, and I'm looking forward to the day that we can get it back.
And it's a slightly different rink too. It's wider, so the game's a little faster. I love Olympic hockey.
Yep.
All right. Yep. The last question we have for you is, what's your best piece of advice for aspiring broadcasters?
I guess it tracks closely to my path and my, I guess, luck of the draw in getting a gig like this. But I always felt like having a diverse skill set, or having a breadth of background, will enable you to open more doors in your career. I would have been perfectly happy with my 9-to-5 job and doing games on the side in the AHL and at Northeastern. I would have been perfectly happy if that were my broadcasting ceiling. Perfectly happy. Because I didn't feel pressure to, put together the next gig that would, pay for my rent, basically. I didn't feel any of that pressure. I could love the work for what it was. So I feel if you are an aspiring broadcaster and you're not working in sports right now, it's okay. It's actually, I think, a benefit to have another skill set to bring to bear to a potential employer. And to not be discouraged by that. I think to actually pursue something that's different than what you do on a day-to-day basis. I think sometimes, as privileged as we are to be working in this industry, we're working every single day. Like, it's hard to have that perspective that most people have have another line of work, and this is their joy outside of work. So you need to have as much joy walking into work every day as somebody does watching at home. So having that diverse experience and background, I think, makes a huge difference in walking into whatever opportunity you get and knowing that you can bring something unique to the table. That's what I always tried to do, at least.
I think that's very good advice. Alex, we thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being here, and good luck with the rest of the season.
Yeah, thank you, and appreciate the invitation, Kate.
Wow, recognition from the one, the only Alex Trebek. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys know, I'm a huge Jeopardy fan. Actually, not fun backstory, but backstory. When Alex Trebek passed, I was driving through New Mexico and I pulled over on the side of the road and I cried. I love Jeopardy. I love that man. And I understand why he would pick this Alex as his successor, because I think he'd do a tremendous job. I don't think he's going to give up the LA Kings job, but it would be really, really cool to get him on there for at least a week.
Yeah, he's got a pretty good gig right now that it seems like he likes. But that's crazy to be that young, to still be kind of that new to the field, and to have someone like Alex Trebek just be like, oh yeah, I think he'd be able to take my
and it
spot.
not even be on your radar. He said it was his welcome to LA moment that like all of a sudden on TMZ they were like, Alex Trebek names Alex Faust as a possible successor. I'm like, I would have died. I probably would have had a heart attack and died if that was me. So
that's gotta be one of those moments where you get the text from your mom or the text and you're just like, this has got to be a joke. Like, what? I wasn't actually mentioned in this interview. Come on. But
for sure. Well, next week we're doing an episode I've been dying to share with you guys. It's the Formula One episode with Chris Medland. He is a Formula One reporter. If you watch Drive to Survive season 1, he is in it. So you'll recognize him, be able to put a face with the name. And you should watch Drive to Survive season 1. It'll give you a good footing, but we'll also do a little bit of a primer before that episode to get you guys ready for it. And yeah, they are testing in Bahrain this weekend for Formula One, and then the following week will be Drive to Survive season 3 premiere. So we wanted to go ahead and split that for you guys, and really looking forward to it.